thank you so much for coming here. I have watched Nawalny again this morning, actually, and I think it's an amazing film. I think it's incredibly touching, and I think the situation where they prank that that Russian scientist is just such a magnificent piece of film. It's really grabbing. So I wanted to ask you first how you got involved with Nawalny in the first place, how you got the idea to do that film, and how you approached the whole thing.
Well, I was working on a completely different film with Christo Grozev. We were doing a project in Kiev, and it wasn't going well. And this was like October 2020. And around the same time, Christo happened to be researching, looking into who tried to poison Navalny, as we see in the film. And he got his first lead, and that's when he told me that he was working on the Navalny investigation. And I said, that would be an amazing film. Why don't we try contacting him? And Christo reached out to Alexei, and Navalny understood that Christo's specific niche is solving Russian state poisonings. You know, if the Russian government poisons you or your loved one and you want to get to the bottom of it, call Christo Grozev, and that's what he does. That's his meat and potatoes. And so Navalny was receptive to Christo's outreach, and we were invited to go and meet with Alexei. The conceit was, Christo was working on the investigation. Navalny wanted to know more, so they were going to meet about that. And then Christo said, by the way, I'm with this film team. Why don't we make a film about this? And Navalny was receptive to that as well. And that's how it all went down.
So it was independent of Navalny himself and independent of all the media companies that got involved later on?
Yeah, it was me, Christo, and one of the film's producers, a woman named Odessa Ray. The three of us really got in a car and snuck across the German-Austrian border, which was closed for COVID. We left from Vienna, and we went to see Navalny.
And Christo, was it ever an issue with him? I mean, I imagine you established trust with him beforehand, working on a different project with him. But was it ever an issue, secrecy? Showing him openly what it looks like, describing the kind of work he does. Wouldn't that put him in danger?
Yes, and it did. Christo was living in Vienna when we met. He had a pretty private life. He was doing his work and was well respected in journalistic communities, but that's about it. Now he's not allowed to come back to Europe. It's too dangerous. It's clear that the Russian government wants to murder him. So he lives in the United States. He's separated from his family, and the complexion of his life looks very different. And what he sacrificed for his work is quite incredible.
Do you feel he had any idea what was going to happen to him?
I'm not sure. That's a good question. You got to imagine that he would. He's a really smart guy, so I'm sure that this is the natural conclusion to fucking with Vladimir Putin. If you give that guy a hard time, he'll murder you. That's what he does. He solves his problems through violence. And Christo single-handedly is such an effective operator. He's more than a journalist. I mean, the work that he does is incredible. And I know that the Kremlin would very much love to kill him. And I'm really glad that hasn't happened.
Makes me think of this sequence where Navalny is treated in a hospital in Siberia, because it feels to me that this sequence and how his wife and his team gets him out of there is sort of a very inspiring piece about how, this kind of opposition and of popular work and trying to make people contribute to a cause can actually change things. And it's like a small, minuscule example of what I imagine after watching Navalny. Navalny imagines and hopes for the whole of Russia happening.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, Navalny's hope for the future is what he calls the beautiful Russia of the future. He wants to live in a country that's sort of a modern European nation state. That's what he hopes for. And that's what he's sacrificing so much for. The day he went back, we didn't know what he was going back to. His future was uncertain, but we knew that it was grim, and it was, what has transpired subsequently has been very upsetting. This film has, expanded my life in so many amazing ways. I met my wife when we were promoting the movie. I have been given career opportunities. We won the Oscar, all of these amazing, exciting things. But it's all predicated on Navalny being in a gulag, being in this horrible place. It's as his life was contracting and becoming quite small, mine was expanding and blowing up. And that's a very challenging legacy for me personally. At the end of the day, I take solace in knowing that I'm continuing to do so much for Alexei, for his mission, for his cause, for his organization. And I think that that's very meaningful.
It sounds like a very complicated emotional situation for you as well.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. It's like if it's very bittersweet. It's tough to you look at other people who have had success like this, who films have won Oscars because they've written screenplays or directed movies, and it's a different type of experience. But when you have so much success, as I said, because your friend is in a gulag and is in a horrible circumstance, it's impossible to be totally happy about it. It is very bittersweet. And I would say that it has a complicated legacy, the film, and its success.
Is there anything people could do to contribute to helping Navalny in some way?
Yeah, well, I think that's a great question. More than anything else, the very easy thing to do is to just donate to his foundation. Send, €10 to the Anti-Corruption Foundation. The work that they're doing to expose the corruption in Putin's government and oligarchy is really important, and no one in the Russian sphere is as effective as they are. So I think that that's a small thing that people can do. And then the other thing that people can do is to just spread the word about the movie, tell people to watch the film, make sure as many people as possible know who Alexei is, know his mission, his struggle, the position he's in now. I think it's very important that he does not languish into obscurity.
With a film like this, it's really hard to sort of step back from the human fate behind it and the politics of it. But I would love to talk to you a little bit about your approach as a filmmaker, making it, and also in general your approach to documentary filmmaking. I mean, a big piece of this film is that it's structured like a thriller.
Yeah.
How did this come about, and how was that idea for you as a working hypothesis on editing the film and creating the film?
Well, this was one of those movies that was sort of miraculous in how fast it came together. It took us 14 months door to door to make the movie, which is crazy fast. And when it comes to the sort of conceit of make it a thriller and it being sort of a propulsive, thrilling film, I didn't really have time to spend too much time conceiving of what the film was, because it was just, we were just shooting the movie and everything was going so quick. But I had this sense that I wanted it to feel like a spy film. I wanted it to lean into the tropes of the thrillery genre. And when we were shooting the film, I had that sort of approximate sensibility. I knew that I wanted to be funny. I knew that Nawalny was a hilarious character.
Yeah.
And I knew that we had a very limited time frame with him. We'd had 2 months with Alexei, then he would leave. And he'd go back to Russia, and we'd never be able to put him on camera again. And so I had to be very cautious and aware that I needed to shoot as much as I could with him while I had him, essentially. So we shot the film.
So those were the sequences taking place in Germany in the winter with the interview.
Everything we shot, and it's the way, for me, it's funny when I'm watching the movie. I can tell Nicky Waddle, the DP, when he shows up, because all of a sudden it looks like a movie. Because when I was shooting, it looked like shit.
Less depth of field. The lighting is great.
I'm shooting by myself. It's dark. It's out of focus. It doesn't look so good. And then Nicky shows up, and all of a sudden it's like we're cooking with gas. It looks like a real movie. And then when we started editing the film, that's when we really honed in on the feel and the tone, what we wanted it to be like, how we wanted it to feel, how we wanted it to play, really leaning into the tropes of the genre.
And I imagine Navalny, gave you a lot of access to his own material and footage.
Oh, totally. Yeah, that's the other thing. I mean, this film is just miracle. upon miracle, and the Navalny archive, what they had at their disposal was vast. And they gave us access to everything, and that was really cool.
So can you take us through the sequence of what you shot in what order over this period of 14 months, you said?
I shot the few days I was shooting by myself. There were a few things that got cut out of the movie. There was this one conversation that happens in the cafe between Christo, Maria, and Alexei. I don't know, maybe it's 25 minutes into the movie, I don't remember, but Christo's meeting with them for the first time. And there's a cuckoo clock, the German cuckoo clock. And then I shot the donkey pony scene, which is one of my favorite parts of the movie.
Yeah, it's so touching when you go back to it at the end.
Yeah.
It's really
and
hard,
again, if you watch the first one, and then you watch the second one, you can clearly see that Nikki shot the second one, and I shot the first one. Yeah, so we and then Nikki showed up, and we were shooting stuff every day for that November, December, and first few weeks of January. December, January, really. And then January, like 12, 13, 14, was when we were shooting his interview. And that was like a 3-day thing. And I wanted to design the interview to achieve a few objectives. I liked the idea that it felt like we were just sitting across from the guy having a beer, as if we're the bartender and he's telling us his story, that sort of sensibility. But at the same time, I wanted it to feel presidential. You know, when we think about a presidential address, it's the politician, the president is sitting right in the middle of the frame, looking right at the camera. And I wanted to have that sort of sensibility. Yeah. And then we broke the interview up into night and to day. And I designed the interview so the aspects about the poisoning, about the recovery, about being airlifted from Russia, about waking up from a coma, all of these things took place at night. So they had that sort of dark, noirish tone. And then all of the stuff about his backstory, his political identity, you know, his childhood, biographical details we did during the day, which I actually thought...
That's a great idea.
Yeah, it worked really well, because then there's a clear sort of like visual variation and distinction between the interview. And when we were editing the film, there was a moment where I didn't even think the interview would be in the movie. I thought that it wanted to be like a propulsive verite film, but what I came to understand is like, oh no, these interviews are now a historic document, because this guy, you know, if he doesn't, this could be the last interview he ever gives, you know. He could be killed in prison. We don't know what's going to happen. And so we leaned back into the interviews, and I thought it was a very effective device to sort of sprinkle them throughout the movie.
Yeah, it's really hard to think about the impact and the historical things surrounding the whole film. It's breathtaking, really, and especially in front of the backdrop of the Ukraine war.
Yeah, the war started. The escalation of the war started 3 weeks after the film premiered. It's quite stunning.
Yeah. How do you tell his human side of the story? Because that's something that's also one of the most touching things about him. Like you said, his humor, but also little moments. Then there are moments when I think his wife or his assistant records a statement for their channel, and then we see sort of after the official part of that statement, the one that's sent out, you see like her taking a breather, reflecting on what she said. How do you go about making all these characters as human as possible and as relatable as possible?
I don't really know. I don't know. We just put them in the movie, but the how to make them human or relatable, I'm not really sure how to answer that. I think that they just sort of are innately. Navalny's very theatrical. He's a performer. He's a politician. That's not lost on me, right? So when the camera's on him, he's like hamming it up, and he's sort of on. Yeah. But the human drama and the stakes of the thing were very intense, and so for anyone watching, they can really identify with how intense the whole thing is.
What would you say is the biggest thing you've learned personally from making that film?
As a human being or as a filmmaker?
Both.
As a filmmaker, I think my biggest takeaway has to do with collaboration. And so often there's this impulse, if you're the director or the filmmaker, that it's like you have to be the auteur, you have to have the vision, you have to, it's all about you and your vision. And I kind of think that's bullshit. I think it's like a film is made because of collective genius. And what I learned as a filmmaker in this movie is trusting your collaborators and your colleagues and understanding that your opinion's often not the right one. And the mark of a good director is having the strength of character to listen to the people around you and to understand that your ideas might not be the strongest. And then as a human being, well, politically, I think what Nawalny reminded me of, which I think is very important, is the value and virtue of dialogue. Whether you agree with Nawalny's politics or not, one thing that everyone should admire about him is that he frames conversation as sort of a cornerstone value of his political ideology and his political identity. And in an era when people of different political backgrounds are increasingly more separate and divided, what he really speaks to is the question of coming together and having conversation, even if it's a tough conversation. And his life is about courage and it's about resilience. And the other thing that I carry forward, the wisdom that I carry forward from having known him and made the movie, has to do with courage and resilience. There's nothing in my life that's happening that's harder than what's happening in his life. And he is maintaining his humor, and he is maintaining his sort of lightness amidst a very, very dark circumstance. And so, if ever something is happening in my life that is causing me to struggle or doubt or whatever, I just understand that my capacity for resilience is endless, and Nawalny embodies that.
Where do you think he takes that strength from?
I don't know. I think it's just inside of you. Like you have it or you don't. I don't know if you can learn to be resilient like that. I think maybe it comes in from childhood. Maybe I really don't know. Why are some people resilient and some people aren't?
What would be your best guess based on your experience?
Of where his thing comes from?
Yeah, or also talking about yourself.
Yeah, I wonder in the capacity of my own life where that comes from. I think it has a lot to do with my upbringing and my family, my parents. They were very loving and supportive, but in a way where, they weren't. I built character, and a sense of resilience as a young person. I think that some of it might be biological and inherited. My grandfather was an Auschwitz survivor, and so might be something in that, just that the sense of resilience that I have, I think, just from being a Jew. And then for Nawalny, I who knows where that comes from? It's like superhuman. I'm not sure.
Is there any advice you could give to young filmmakers starting out on how to find a story worth telling?
Well, I think finding a story worth telling. How to find a story worth telling. It's like, I would say, yeah, go out in the world, talk to people, engage, read things. When I started making films, I spent 2 years going around the world to places that were interesting for me and finding a story to tell. And I would just show up somewhere without having anything to do, and I would make a movie. I'd find a subject, and I'd find a story worth telling, and I'd make a movie. And I did that 3 or 4 times. And what that exercise taught me is that in any city, in any town, in any square block, there's a story worth telling somewhere. And it's just about going out there and not being afraid and figuring out how to do it.
What is your next story?
Oh, I'm working on a few films right now, which would be inappropriate for me to talk about them at this stage, and I'm working on a fiction film, directing a fiction film that I wrote, which is an exciting new creative challenge for me, and ultimately just staying very, very busy and engaged with the work, which is all I really want to be doing.
Well, thank you so much. It's been
Thanks
an
for
awesome
having me.
conversation.
I really appreciate it. Thank you.